We've tried everything. At this point, maybe we should ask the janitor for his 2 cents. The suggestion came from Orion Blackwood, the senior board member whose icy gaze swept over the exhausted executive team as a smirk played on his lips. The room fell silent. Every head turned to the man quietly emptying the trash cans, Cole Bennett. But before he could retreat, CEO Anya Caldwell locked eyes with him. A humorless, challenging smile touched her lips. "He's right," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Close this $10 billion deal for me, and I'll bow to you." The laughter that followed was brittle and strained. It was 11 p.m. in a glass-walled conference room that felt more like a cage. For 3 days, Anya's team had been in a state of war, trying to force through the acquisition of Spielhaus, a family-owned German toy company. It was the deal that would save Caldwell Industries from a hostile takeover, the deal that would cement Anya's legacy. And it was in flames. Klaus Richter, the 70-year-old patriarch of Spielhaus, had just sent his final, blistering refusal, calling their offer an insult from American vultures. Cole kept his expression neutral, his movements economical as he replaced the liner in the wastebasket. He had heard every word of their meeting, the shouting, the frustrated sighs, the increasingly aggressive strategies. They talked about leveraged buyouts, shareholder pressure, legal loopholes. They talked about Klaus Richter as an obstacle, a fossil to be bulldozed. They never once talked about him as a man. "The old man is a sentimental fool," Orion grumbled, loosening his tie. "He's sitting on a gold mine and wants to talk about tradition. It's absurd." "Our offer is more than generous," Anya snapped, her patience worn to a razor's edge. She gestured to the janitor. Even he could see that. A $10 billion valuation for a company that still uses wood lathes. Cole finished his task and turned his cart toward the door, his worn-out sneakers silent on the polished marble. He just wanted to finish his shift and get home to his daughter, Daisy. That was his world now. Simple, quiet, safe. But Anya's words, sharp and dismissive, caught him. He paused with his hand on the door, his back to the room. "That's the problem," he said, his voice quiet but clear in the tense silence. Anya's head snapped up. "What did you say?" Cole turned around slowly. He looked at the most powerful woman in the city, at her tailored suit that cost more than his car, at the exhaustion and fury warring in her eyes. He was just a janitor. He knew the rules. Be invisible. Be silent. But he couldn't stop the words. "You're trying to buy a man's life's work. You think the price is the only thing that matters? You're wrong." Orion Blackwood let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Is he serious?" Anya stood, her chair scraping back harshly. She walked toward Cole until she was standing directly in front of him. She was taller than he expected, and her gaze was intense enough to feel like a physical weight. "And what would you know about $10 billion deals?" "I don't know anything about them," Cole admitted, his voice steady. He met her stare without flinching. "But I know about fathers. And I know about Germans." The executives exchanged confused glances. Anya's eyes narrowed. The sarcasm was gone, replaced by a dangerous curiosity. She waved a dismissive hand at the rest of the room. "Everyone, get out! I want to be alone with our new consultant. The command was absolute." Orion gave Cole a look of utter contempt as he filed out with the others, the heavy glass door clicking shut behind them. The sprawling, brightly lit conference room suddenly felt intimate, an arena with only 2 combatants. "You have 1 minute to explain why I shouldn't have security throw you out of this building for good," Anya said, her voice low and lethal. "My wife," Cole began, the words tasting like old memories. "She was from a small town in Bavaria, not far from where Spielhaus is based. Her father was a clockmaker. He had a workshop, not a factory. His hands were his legacy." He saw a flicker of something in Anya's expression. Impatience, maybe, but she didn't stop him. "When we would visit, I'd spend hours in that workshop," Cole continued. "I learned the language, but more than that, I learned the mindset. To men like her father, to men like Klaus Richter, what they create is a part of their soul. It's not just a product. It's a promise. Your team approaches him with threats and spreadsheets. You're not just trying to buy his company, you're telling him his life has a price tag. And to him, that's the ultimate insult. Anya was silent, studying him. She was a woman who dealt in facts and figures, in market projections and shareholder value. He was talking about souls and promises. It should have been laughable. It wasn't. "You speak German?" she asked, a hint of suspicion in her voice. "Fluently," he confirmed. She paced for a moment, the click of her heels the only sound. "Orion thinks I'm failing. He's been waiting for this since my father died, waiting for me to stumble so he can take over. This deal has to happen. I don't have time for poetry and promises, Mr. Bennett. Cole Bennett. I need a weapon, Mr. Bennett. Not a philosophy lesson." "Respect isn't a philosophy," Cole countered softly. "It's a strategy. It's the one you haven't tried." He thought of his daughter, Daisy, waiting for him. He needed this job. He should just shut up and walk away. But he thought of his late wife, Maria, and the pride she had in her heritage. He couldn't stay silent. Anya stopped pacing and stood in front of him again, her expression unreadable. She was cornered, and she knew it. Every high-priced expert she had hired had failed. Now, in the middle of the night, a janitor was telling her they were all wrong. It was insane. It was also the only new idea she'd heard in 72 hours. "All right, Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice a strange mix of disbelief and decision. "You think you know how to talk to this man?" She gestured toward the blank holographic display. "Prove it." He stared at her, confused. "Prove it how?" Anya walked to the head of the table and picked up a tablet, tossing it to him. He caught it instinctively. "You have until 6 a.m., she declared, her voice once again the cold, commanding tone of a CEO. "When I walk into my office, I want a one-page proposal on my desk. A new strategy. Your strategy. Tell me exactly what you would do to save this deal." She started for the door, then paused, turning back to him. "If it's the sentimental nonsense you've been spouting in here, you're fired. But if it's something else, if it gives me even a sliver of hope, then we'll talk." She walked out, leaving him alone in the cavernous room, the tablet feeling impossibly heavy in his hands. He looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. He had 6 hours to come up with a plan to save a $10 billion deal. 6 hours to justify the craziest risk he had ever taken in his life. The tablet felt cold and alien in his hands. Cole stared at the blank screen, a reflection of his own tired face staring back at him. A one-page proposal. He didn't know the first thing about corporate strategy. He didn't know buzzwords like synergy or optimization. He just knew what he felt. A deep, instinctual certainty that their entire approach was a declaration of war on a man who valued peace. He didn't use the tablet. Instead, he walked over to the credenza and found a simple notepad and a pen. He sat back down at the massive, empty table and closed his eyes, shutting out the glittering skyline of the city. He thought of Maria's father, Gunther, a man whose hands were stained with wood polish and whose knuckles were swollen with arthritis, but who could make a cuckoo clock chime with the sound of pure joy. He remembered Gunther telling him once, in slow, careful German, "A man's workshop is the museum of his heart. Everything inside tells his story." Klaus Richter wasn't a clockmaker, but he was a toy maker. What was a toy, if not a small engine of joy? A story waiting to be told. Cole began to write. He didn't write a proposal. He wrote a plan. A single, simple, shockingly human plan. When he finished, there were only a few paragraphs on the page. He tore it out, folded it neatly, and placed it in his shirt pocket. He spent the rest of his shift on the autopilot, his mind a million miles away, somewhere in the rolling hills of Bavaria. He got home just as the first hints of dawn were painting the sky. His apartment was small, on the 3rd floor of a walk-up, but it was clean and filled with the scent of the lemon tea Daisy liked. He peeked into her room. She was asleep, her small form curled under a handmade quilt, her breathing soft and even. For a moment, the weight of the world lifted from his shoulders. This was his $10 billion deal. This was the only thing that mattered. He showered, changed out of his uniform, and made 2 mugs of tea. When he came back into her room, she was stirring. "Hey, sleepyhead," he whispered, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Morning, Daddy," she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "Did you have a good night at work?" "It was interesting," he said, handing her the mug. He never lied to her. "I might have done something a little crazy." She sat up, suddenly more awake. "What kind of crazy?" "The kind of crazy that gets you in trouble or gets you a promotion," he said with a half smile. "I'm not sure which yet." She giggled. "I vote for promotion." He kissed her forehead. "Me too, kiddo. Me too." At 5:55 a.m., Cole walked back into the silent, imposing lobby of Caldwell Industries. He took the elevator to the top floor. Anya Caldwell's office was a corner suite with a view that seemed to stretch into forever. The lights were off, the space pristine and intimidating. He walked over to the massive mahogany desk, took the folded piece of paper from his pocket, and placed it squarely in the center. Then, he turned and left, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. Anya arrived at precisely 6:01 a.m. She wore a different suit, a sharp charcoal gray, and her expression was even harder than the night before. She didn't seem to have slept at all. She strode into her office, tossing her keys on a side table without breaking stride. Then she stopped. She saw the single folded piece of notepaper on her desk. Not a printout, not an email. A piece of paper, like a relic from a forgotten age. She unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, clean, and masculine. "Ms. Caldwell, you are not buying a company. You are asking a man to trust you with his family's soul. Stop sending lawyers. Stop sending accountants. Stop sending threats. Send a letter, a real one, handwritten. Not from a CEO, but from a parent. Write it in German. Tell him you understand what it means to build something to pass on to your child. Tell him you don't want to erase his legacy. You want to protect it for a new generation of children. Ask him to meet you, not in a boardroom, but at his workshop. Let him show you his story. Don't talk about money. Talk about his first toy. Ask him what he wants his grandchildren to remember about him. This isn't a negotiation. It's an adoption. You have to prove you're worthy of his child." Anya read it 3 times. Her first reaction was a flash of hot anger. An adoption? Was he insane? This was a multi-billion-dollar transaction, not a family drama. This was the most simplistic, naive, and frankly insulting piece of advice she had ever received. She crumpled the note in her fist, and then she stopped. She smoothed it back out on her desk, the creases a testament to her frustration. She stared at the words, "A parent, to pass on to your child." She thought of her own daughter, Lily, who was probably being dressed by the nanny right now. A girl she saw for maybe an hour a day. What legacy was she building for her? A mountain of money and a mother who was never there. She pressed a button on her intercom. "Get me Cole Bennett from facilities. I want him in my office." Now, a few minutes later, Cole stood before her desk. He looked tired, but his gaze was direct. "This," Anya said, holding up the note with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated, "is your grand strategy?" "A pen pal club." "It's a sign of respect," Cole replied calmly. "It's showing him you're willing to meet him on his terms, in his language. And you think a letter is going to make him forget about the 9 zeros on our offer?" She scoffed. "It might make him see the person behind them," Cole said. "You're a ghost to him, Ms. Caldwell. A name on a legal document. This makes you a human being. Right now, that's the only leverage you have left." She leaned back in her chair, her eyes scanning his face, searching for a crack, a hint of doubt. She found none. He believed every word he was saying. It was infuriating. It was also compelling. Every expert, every consultant had told her to be tougher, to squeeze harder. He was telling her to be softer. It was the one thing no one had dared to suggest. "And I suppose you think you can write this magical letter," she challenged. "I can translate it," he said. "The words have to come from you." She was silent for a full minute, her fingers drumming a frantic, silent rhythm on the arm of her chair. The fate of her company, her father's legacy, rested on this moment, on a choice between the brutal, logical world she knew and this leap of faith. "All right, Bennett," she said finally, the words sharp and decisive. "We'll try it your way." Cole felt a wave of relief so profound it almost made him dizzy. "But," she added, leaning forward, her eyes pinning him in place, "there's a condition." "What condition?" "I'm not hiding behind a piece of paper. If this is about being human, then we do it face to face. The letter will be an invitation to a meeting." She stood up, a new, determined light in her eyes. "And you're not just translating it. You're coming with me to Germany. If I'm walking into the lion's den, I'm bringing the lion tamer with me." Cole felt as if the floor had just dropped out from under him. "Germany?" "Ms. Caldwell, I can't go to Germany. I'm a janitor. I have a daughter. I can't just leave the country." Anya waved a dismissive hand, already walking toward her desk and tapping on her tablet. "We have an HR department. We'll arrange a temporary leave of absence. As for your daughter, hire a sitter. The company will cover the expense." The casualness of her reply hit him like a slap. "A sitter? I can't leave Daisy with a stranger for days. She's my daughter, not an inconvenience." The words were sharper than he intended, but the thought of leaving his child in the hands of someone he didn't know was a non-starter. Anya looked up from her tablet, her eyes flashing with annoyance. "Mr. Bennett, this is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, not a daycare. I need your expertise on the ground. Make the necessary arrangements." That's an order before Cole could argue further. The intercom on her desk buzzed. It was her personal assistant, her voice strained. "Miss Caldwell, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's your nanny on line 1. She says it's urgent." About Lily Anya's corporate mask tightened, but a flicker of concern crossed her face. She stabbed a button on her phone. "What is it, Helen?" Her voice was clipped. She listened for a moment, her posture growing rigid. "A fever of 103? Did you give her the medicine Dr. Evans prescribed?" "I see. No, I'm in a critical meeting. I can't leave right now. Yes, I understand. Call the doctor and let me know what he says." She hung up, her jaw tight. She stared at the phone for a long moment, a war raging behind her eyes. For the first time, she didn't look like a CEO. She looked like a worried mother. "Is your daughter okay?" Cole asked softly, his anger forgotten. "She'll be fine," Anya said, her voice a fortress. "She gets these fevers." "The nanny knows the protocol. My daughter gets ear infections when she's stressed," Cole offered quietly. "I used to think it was just a medical thing. Then I realized it always happened when I was working too much, or when the anniversary of her mom's passing was coming up. Sometimes a fever isn't just a fever." Anya looked at him, her expression unreadable. His simple fatherly insight had breached a wall she didn't even know was there. He wasn't judging her. He was just telling a truth. "What do you suggest I do, Mr. Bennett?" she asked, the question laced with a strange, genuine curiosity. "Cancel the trip? Let the company fall apart so I can go home and hold her hand?" "No," Cole said. "I'd suggest you call her. Not the nanny. Her. Let her hear your voice. Tell her you love her and that you'll be home as soon as you can. 5 minutes. It's not about fixing the fever. It's about letting her know she's not alone in it." Anya stared at him, then at her phone. She said nothing. She simply turned away and began typing furiously on her tablet. "Send me your daughter's details, and the contact information for whoever will be watching her. My office will handle everything. Be here tomorrow at 7 a.m. with your passport. We'll work on the letter then." It was a dismissal, but as Cole left her office, he had the distinct feeling that something had shifted between them. Meanwhile, Orion Blackwood was on the hunt. He saw Cole leave the executive floor, his expression dazed. A janitor, having a private meeting with the CEO for nearly an hour? It made no sense. He walked past Anya's assistant's desk, his smile predatory. "Big day, Sarah," he said casually. "Anya seems to be in a fighting mood. Are we finally making a move on the Germans?" Sarah, a young woman who was terrified of him, nodded nervously. "I think so, Mr. Blackwood. She's requested the company jet be prepared for a possible trip to Munich." "Excellent," Orion beamed. "Just her and the legal team?" "Her and a consultant," Sarah said, checking her screen. "A Mr. Cole Bennett." Orion's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went cold. Cole Bennett, the janitor, a consultant. Anya was up to something desperate and foolish, and he was going to find out exactly what it was. The next morning, Cole sat opposite Anya at the same massive conference table from the other night. This time, it was just the two of them. In front of her was a sheet of the company's finest linen stationery and a heavy, expensive fountain pen. "All right, Mr. Bennett," she said. "All business. Let's write this letter. What's the opening line?" "No," Cole said gently. "You write. I'll translate. I told you, the words have to be yours." She scowled, but picked up the pen. She started to write, her script sharp and angular. After a minute, she slid the paper across to him. "To Mr. Klaus Richter, CEO of Spielhaus GmbH." Cole shook his head. "No, too formal. You're not writing to a CEO. You're writing to a grandfather. Start with Sehr geehrter Herr Richter. Dear Mr. Richter. And don't mention his title." Anya sighed, frustrated, and started again. For the next hour they worked. It was a slow, arduous process. She would write a sentence in English, full of corporate jargon. He would stop her. "Don't say synergistic partnership," he'd say. "Say you want to build a future together." "Don't say brand legacy," he'd correct. Ask him about the first toy he ever carved for his son. He was forcing her to dig deeper, to move past the language of the boardroom and find the language of the heart. The more he pushed, the more frustrated she became. "This is ridiculous," she finally snapped, throwing the pen down. "I'm the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, and you have me writing like a schoolgirl. What does my relationship with my own father have to do with this?" "Everything," Cole said calmly. "Your father built this company. Richter built his. You both inherited a legacy you're trying to protect. That's your common ground." Tell him that she stared at him, her anger slowly giving way to a grudging understanding. She picked up the pen and began to write again. This time, the words flowed more easily. She wrote about her father, about the pride he took in his work. She wrote about her hopes for her own daughter, Lily. By the time she was done, the page was filled with simple, honest, and powerful words. Cole took the letter and translated it, his own handwriting a careful, steady script beneath hers. When he was finished, he pushed it back to her. "This is a good letter, Miss Caldwell." "Anya," she said, her voice quiet. "Call me Anya." She looked at the letter, then at him. The armor was gone, if only for a moment. "Thank you, Cole." She sealed the letter in an envelope and sent it via international express courier. As the messenger left, a heavy silence fell between them. They had sent a message in a bottle across an ocean of distrust. Anya walked to the window, looking down at the city below. "Well, Bennett," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "for both our sakes, I hope you were right." The next 48 hours were a unique form of torture for Anya. She was a woman of action, used to forcing outcomes and driving agendas. Now, all she could do was wait. Every buzz of her phone made her jump. She found herself unable to focus in meetings, her mind constantly drifting to a workshop in a small German town, and the old man who held her company's future in his hands. Following Cole's advice felt like a lingering echo in her mind. That evening, for the first time in months, she left the office at 6. When she walked into her sprawling, silent penthouse apartment, her daughter Lily was in the living room with the nanny, listlessly pushing a doll in a toy stroller. Lily looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. "Mommy, you're home. I'm home, sweetie," Anya said, her voice a little unsteady. She knelt, a gesture that felt foreign and stiff. "How was your day? And how's your fever?" Lily shrugged. "It's gone. Helen gave me the yucky medicine." She looked at her mother, a question in her eyes. "Are you staying for dinner?" The question twisted something in Anya's chest. "I am," she said, forcing a warm smile. "And I thought maybe after dinner we could read a story together. The one about the castle in the clouds." A small, genuine smile bloomed on Lily's face. It was like watching a flower open after a long winter. "Really? Really?" Anya confirmed. That night, as she sat on the edge of her daughter's bed, reading the familiar words, she felt a profound sense of peace that had nothing to do with stock prices or profit margins. Cole's words came back to her. Sometimes a fever isn't just a fever. He was right, and it terrified her. Across town, Cole was also preparing. He sat at his small kitchen table with his daughter Daisy, a plate of half-eaten spaghetti between them. He had just finished talking to Mrs. Gable, the kind, elderly woman in the apartment next door who had been a surrogate grandmother to Daisy since Maria passed away. She had agreed to have Daisy stay with her without a moment's hesitation. "So you're really going?" Daisy asked, her fork tracing patterns in the pasta sauce. "On a big airplane? With the big boss lady?" "I really am," Cole said, taking her hand. "It's a very important project, sweetie." "It's to help the company. Is the boss lady nice?" Daisy asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Cole thought for a moment. Nice wasn't the word he would use. Complicated, driven, powerful, maybe even scared. "She's learning," he said finally. "I think she's trying to be." Daisy seemed to accept this. "Okay, Daddy, but you have to bring me back something cool. From Germany." "It's a deal," he said, relief washing over him. He hated leaving her, but seeing the excitement in her eyes made it a little easier. This trip wasn't just about saving a company anymore. It was about building a better future for this little girl. While Anya and Cole focused on their children, Orion Blackwood was focused on destruction. From his own lavish office, he made a secure call to a man named Stefan Hess, a ruthless financial journalist in Munich with a reputation for taking confidential tips for the right price. "Stefan, my friend," Orion said, his voice smooth as silk. "I have some information for you. Caldwell Industries is making a last-ditch effort to salvage the Spielhaus deal. I heard Richter sent them packing." Stefan's voice crackled back. "He did. But the CEO, Anya Caldwell, is unstable, desperate. She's flying to Munich for a private meeting, and you'll never guess who she's bringing as her lead advisor." Orion paused for dramatic effect. "Her janitor." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. "You're joking." "I wish I were," Orion said with a sigh. "His name is Cole Bennett. No credentials, no experience. She's clearly had some kind of breakdown. The board is preparing to vote her out. I'm giving you the exclusive. You can frame it as a story of a once great American company crumbling under the leadership of its erratic, emotional CEO. It will be a bombshell." "Orion," Stefan said, his voice now greedy with excitement. "This is pure gold. Consider it done." Orion hung up the phone, a cruel smile playing on his lips. He couldn't stop Anya from getting the meeting, but he could make sure that by the time she arrived, Klaus Richter would see her as a fool and a madwoman. The ground would be salted before her plane even touched down. The package arrived at Anya's office on the second day. It wasn't from a courier. It was delivered by a private security firm. It was a simple, unmarked cardboard box. Anya's assistant brought it in, her hands trembling slightly. Anya dismissed her and closed the office door. She stared at the box, her heart hammering. She called Cole, who was in the middle of his shift, and put him on speakerphone. "It's here," she said, her voice tight. "A package from Germany." "Open it," Cole's voice urged, calm and steady through the speaker. With trembling fingers, Anya sliced the tape and opened the flaps. Inside, nestled in a bed of wood shavings, was a small, exquisitely carved wooden bird. It was a nightingale, its details so perfect it looked like it might burst into song. Beneath it was a single, thick card. She picked it up. On it was a line of elegant, old-fashioned script, written in German. "What does it say, Cole?" she whispered, her breath catching in her throat. She heard him take a sharp breath on the other end of the line. He translated the words slowly, his voice filled with a quiet reverence. "A man's workshop is his heart. My heart is open on Friday at noon." Anya sank into her chair, the wooden bird clutched in her hand. A wave of disbelief and elation washed over her. It had worked. The crazy, impossible human strategy had actually worked. "He's saying yes," she breathed. "He's saying more than that," Cole said. "He's welcoming you home." 12 hours later, they were sitting across from each other in the plush cabin of the Caldwell Industries Gulfstream jet, the night sky a blanket of stars outside the window. The roar of the engines was a low hum as they began their ascent, leaving the city lights far below. The wooden nightingale sat on the polished table between them, a silent testament to the strange journey they were on. Anya looked at Cole, the janitor in a borrowed suit who somehow understood the world better than all of her high-priced advisors. The sarcasm was gone from her voice, replaced by a weary, cautious respect. "No turning back now, Mr. Bennett," she said. Cole met her gaze, a small, confident smile on his face. "I wasn't planning on it, Anya." The 8-hour flight passed in a strange, suspended reality. For the first time, Anya wasn't buried in spreadsheets or taking hostile calls. The quiet hum of the engines was a world away from the chaos of her life. She found herself watching Cole. He wasn't looking at the stock market reports on the cabin screen or reading financial papers. He was staring out the window at the endless carpet of clouds, a look of quiet contemplation on his face. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, the question surprising even herself. Cole turned from the window. "I was thinking about the last time I made this trip. It was with my wife, Maria. We were bringing Daisy to meet her grandparents for the first time. She was only 6 months old." A sad, gentle smile touched his lips. Maria was so proud. She said it was like bringing her heart home to show her family. Anya was silent for a moment, processing the intimacy of his words. "You must miss her very much." "Every day," he said simply. "After she passed, the world just got loud. I was a project manager at a construction firm. A good one. But it was all deadlines and budget fights and angry clients. I'd come home and all that noise was still in my head. I couldn't hear my own daughter. So I quit. I took the janitor job because it was quiet. It let me be a father again." His story was the opposite of hers. He had walked away from the noise she had spent her entire life chasing. "My father was the opposite," she found herself saying, her voice softer than usual. "He was the heart of this company. A brilliant inventor. He could design anything, but he hated the business side. He used to call the boardroom the vampire's castle. When he got sick, the board members, people like Orion, started circling. They saw him as weak. So I had to become the shark. I had to be tougher and smarter and more ruthless than all of them just to protect what he built." "And you did," Cole said, his gaze unwavering. "But maybe you forgot how to stop being the shark when you leave the castle." His words hit their mark, sharp and true. She was the shark everywhere. In the boardroom, at home, even with her own daughter. It was the only way she knew how to survive. They landed at a private airfield outside Munich under a crisp, blue sky. The air smelled different, cleaner, laced with the scent of pine and distant rain. A sleek black Mercedes was waiting for them. As they settled in for the hour-long drive to the small storybook town of Neustadt, where Spielhaus was headquartered, Anya felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Then her phone buzzed with a news alert from a European financial wire. The headline, in bold English, made her blood run cold. Caldwell Industries in turmoil. Erratic CEO bets billions on unorthodox tactics amidst merger collapse. "What is it?" Cole asked, seeing the color drain from her face. She turned the phone so he could see. He read the first few paragraphs, his expression hardening. The article, written by a journalist named Stefan Hess, was a brutal character assassination. It painted Anya as a desperate, failing leader on the verge of a breakdown. It mocked her mysterious new strategy and cited anonymous sources from within her own board, Orion, without a doubt, who expressed grave concerns for the company's future. The most venomous line was buried in the third paragraph. Her latest gambit reportedly involves sidelining her entire experienced legal team in favor of a single, unqualified consultant with no corporate background, a move one source called a shocking and irresponsible display of instability. The hope she'd felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. Orion had done it. He had poisoned the well. Klaus Richter was a proud, traditional man. The moment he read this, the meeting would be over. He would never do business with a woman the world was calling a fool. "It's over," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. She leaned forward, her voice hollow. "Driver, turn around. Take us back to the airport." The driver glanced in the rear-view mirror, awaiting confirmation. "No," Cole said, his voice firm and clear. Anya turned to him, her eyes blazing with a desperate fury. "Did you not just read that, Cole? He's painted me as a lunatic. Richter will be laughed out of his own town if he even meets with me now." Orion won. "No, he didn't," Cole insisted, his voice cutting through her panic. He tapped the phone's screen. "This isn't a sign of your weakness, Anya. It's a sign of his fear. He's not doing this because he thinks you're going to fail. He's doing this because he's terrified you're going to succeed." He leaned closer, his intensity holding her in place. "You think Klaus Richter, a man who has resisted corporate vultures for 50 years, cares about some gossip columnist in Munich? He's a man who reads character, not headlines. Orion just handed us a gift." "A gift?" she asked incredulously. "How is this a gift?" "Because now, when you walk into that workshop, you're not just a CEO. You're an underdog. You're a woman who is being attacked by the very vampires your father warned you about. You're going to walk in there, look him in the eye, and prove that everything in this article is a lie. You're going to show him your character." Her breathing was ragged, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to retreat to her fortress of lawyers and fight back on familiar ground. But Cole's logic was a steady anchor in the storm of her fear. He was right. Running would be an admission of guilt. She looked at him, at the quiet, unshakable strength in his face. He wasn't just a janitor. He was her only ally. She took a deep, shuddering breath. She looked at the driver in the rear-view mirror, her voice no longer hollow, but filled with a new, hard-won resolve. "Keep driving," she said. "We have a meeting to get to." The town of Neustadt was like stepping into a postcard. Cobblestone streets wound between timber-framed houses with overflowing flower boxes. The air was crisp, and the distant sound of a church bell echoed through the valley. In the window of every other shop, there were handcrafted wooden toys, soldiers, dolls, intricate puzzles, all bearing the small, elegant Spielhaus logo. This wasn't just where Klaus Richter worked. This was his kingdom. Their hotel was a historic inn called the Gilded Bear. As Anya swept into the lobby, her sharp suit and tense energy a stark contrast to the cozy, wood-paneled surroundings, the woman at the front desk looked up. Her polite smile froze for a fraction of a second. It was a flicker of recognition, quickly masked, but Anya saw it. The poison had arrived before they had. The check-in was professionally cold. Anya could feel the eyes of the few patrons in the lobby on her. They were whispering. She felt a familiar, defensive anger rise in her, but she crushed it down. "You are not a shark," she told herself, the thought feeling foreign. "You are an underdog." Once in her suite, she paced the room, the beautiful antique furniture feeling like a cage. The article had stripped her of her power. Here, she wasn't a CEO. She was a headline, a joke. She picked up the phone and called Cole's adjoining room. "They know," she said the moment he answered. "The woman at the desk, the people in the lobby. They've all read it. They're looking at me like I've lost my mind." "Good," Cole's voice came back, infuriatingly calm. "Let them." "Let them?" she repeated, her voice rising. "Cole, my reputation is the only weapon I have. Orion just melted it down for scrap." "No," he said. "Your character is the only weapon you have. Your reputation is just what people like Orion want you to think matters. Did you bring the nightingale?" Anya looked at the small wooden bird sitting on her nightstand. "Yes." "Then you have everything you need. Don't walk in there and apologize for the article. Don't even mention it. Walk in, put the bird on his workbench, and let it speak for you. He's testing you, Anya. He wants to see if you'll be rattled by gossip. Show him you're not. His certainty was an anchor." She took a deep breath, her panic receding. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." At 5 minutes to noon, they walked to the Spielhaus workshop. It wasn't a factory. It was a sprawling chalet-style building that smelled of fresh-cut pine and varnish. Inside, it was surprisingly quiet, the air humming with a gentle whir of unseen machines. A stern-looking woman led them through the main floor, where a handful of artisans, old and young, were painstakingly painting tiny details on wooden figurines. No one looked up. The silence was heavy, deliberate. They were shown into a large, sunlit office that was more of a personal museum than a corporate space. The walls were lined with shelves holding toys from the past century, a vibrant history of childhood. A massive, worn oak desk sat in the center of the room. Behind it stood Klaus Richter. He was a formidable man with a shock of white hair, a weathered face, and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wasn't smiling. He gestured to two simple wooden chairs, remaining standing himself. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his German-accented English as sharp and precise as a chisel. "I see you have made quite a name for yourself in my country before even arriving." He held up a folded newspaper from his desk. It was the Munich financial paper. The headline was visible even from across the room. Anya's stomach plummeted. Cole had been wrong. This was the first and only thing he wanted to talk about. This was the end. Her mouth went dry. Every corporate instinct screamed at her to defend, deflect, and attack. She could feel Cole's eyes on her. "Show him your character." She ignored the newspaper. She ignored the bait. She reached into her bag, her hand closing around the smooth, familiar shape of the wooden nightingale. She walked forward, not to the chairs, but to a long, scarred workbench against the wall, a place of honor covered in half-finished carvings and well-worn tools. She gently placed the small bird on the bench, its delicate form a stark contrast to the heavy industrial space. Then she turned back to Klaus Richter, looked him directly in the eye, and spoke the German words Cole had coached her on, her accent clumsy but her voice clear. "Ein Vater schützt, was liebt." A father protects what he loves. The silence that followed was absolute. Richter's icy gaze flickered from Anya's face to the nightingale on his workbench, then to Cole, who stood quietly by the door. He was seeing them. Not the caricatures from the newspaper, but two people who had traveled across the world to offer a gesture of respect. A long moment passed. The stern mask on Richter's face didn't vanish, but something in his eyes softened, the hard frost beginning to thaw. He had expected a fight, a denial, an argument. He had not expected this. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "The newspaper is for wrapping fish," he said gruffly. tossing it into a wastebasket beside his desk with a thud of finality. He then looked at them, a new, calculating light in his eyes. "The meeting is not here," he announced. He walked toward a heavy, unmarked wooden door at the back of his office. "Come, there is something you must see." He opened the door and gestured for them to follow, leading them away from the office and deeper into the heart of his kingdom. They exchanged a quick, uncertain glance. They had passed the first test, but the real one, it seemed, had just begun. The heavy wooden door opened not into another part of the factory, but into a quiet, almost sacred space. It was a recreation of a turn-of-the-century workshop. The air smelled of aged wood, oiled steel, and something else, history. Antique tools hung in neat rows on the walls. In the center of the room was a simple, scarred workbench, and on it, a single, half-finished wooden horse. Glass cases lined the walls, filled not with mass-produced products, but with prototypes, early models, and faded photographs of generations of Richters with sawdust on their clothes and pride in their eyes. Klaus Richter walked over to the workbench and picked up a small, worn-out carving knife. "This was my grandfather's," he said, his voice a low rumble. "He started Spielhaus in this very room, with this knife. He did not dream of a $10 billion valuation, Ms. Caldwell. He dreamed of making a toy that a child would love so much. They would pass it down to their own child." He then led them to one of the cases and pointed to a simple, slightly clumsy-looking wooden soldier. "This was the first toy my father designed. He was 8 years old. He gave it to me on my 5th birthday. It is the most valuable thing I own," Anya understood at once. This wasn't a meeting. It was a lesson. He was showing her the soul of his company, page by page. The old Anya, the shark, would have been looking at her watch, impatient to get to the numbers. But the woman standing here now, the one who had just reconnected with her own daughter, was captivated. "My father kept his first prototype in his desk drawer," she said, her voice soft. It was a memory she hadn't accessed in years. It was a circuit board. He called it the engine of the future. He was so proud of it. After he died, the board wanted to have it encased in glass for the lobby. I said no. I keep it in my office. Sometimes, late at night, I take it out. Just to hold it, Richter looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. He saw not a corporate raider, but a daughter trying to protect her father's dream. He gave a slow nod of understanding. Cole stood back, watching the exchange. He was a bridge between two worlds. When Anya struggled to find a word to express a concept, he would quietly supply the German phrase. When Richter told a story rooted in a local Bavarian tradition, Cole would give Anya a brief, whispered explanation. He wasn't leading the conversation, he was simply making sure they could hear each other's hearts. Back in New York, Orion Blackwood was seething. He was on the phone with Stefan Hess, his voice a low snarl. "What do you mean he met with them?" Orion demanded. "Your article was supposed to make her a pariah." "It did," the journalist insisted. "The talk of the town. But my source at the inn said they went to the workshop at noon as planned. They were in there for over an hour. Find out what happened in that room," Orion commanded. "And find me everything you can on this Cole Bennett. A man doesn't just go from a janitor's closet to a CEO's private jet. There's a story there. A dirty one, I'll bet. Find it. I want him ruined. I want them both ruined." He slammed the phone down. His plan had failed, and now he was going to war. In the quiet of the workshop, Klaus Richter finally led them back to his office. The atmosphere had changed completely. The hostility was gone, replaced by a fragile, tentative respect. He stood behind his desk, his expression serious. "My company is not for sale, Ms. Caldwell." Anya's heart stopped. After all this, had she still failed? "However," Richter continued, a faint smile touching his lips for the first time, "I am an old man, and my own son has no interest in this world. Spielhaus needs a new guardian, a partner, not an owner." He laid out his terms, and none of them were about money. He wanted a guarantee that not a single worker in Neustadt would lose their job. He wanted a permanent seat on the board for his family, to protect the brand's integrity. And he wanted a multi-million-dollar investment to create a new apprenticeship program, to teach the art of toy making to the next generation. It wasn't an exit strategy. It was a succession plan. Anya listened, her mind racing. It was unconventional. It was complicated. And it was brilliant. It was a deal that honored the past while building a future. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "We can agree to those terms." Richter nodded, seemingly satisfied. But there was one final test. He walked to a heavy safe in the corner of the room, turned the dial, and pulled out a thick, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. He placed it gently on the desk between them. "This was my father's first design journal," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It contains the founding principles of our company, the philosophies behind every toy we have ever made." He pushed the book toward Anya. "Go back to your hotel. Read this, both of you. If you understand what is written in these pages, if you understand the responsibility that comes with them, then we will have a deal. We will talk numbers tomorrow morning at 9. Anya stared at the journal. It felt heavier than any legal contract. He was handing her his family's soul, trusting her not to crush it. This was no longer about a transaction. It was about earning the right to be a part of a legacy. Back in the quiet warmth of Anya's hotel suite, they sat at a small table, the antique journal placed between them like a sacred text. The room was silent except for the soft rustle of the old pages and Cole's low, steady voice as he translated the elegant, spidery German script. The journal wasn't what Anya had expected. There were no technical schematics or manufacturing plans. It was a book of philosophies. Each page contained a sketch of a toy, and beside it, handwritten notes about the child who would play with it. "A toy soldier is not a model of war," Cole translated one passage. "He is a guardian of the bedroom door, a silent friend who stands watch while a child sleeps. His uniform must be brave, his expression kind." Another page showed a simple wooden train. "The journey of a toy train is not from one end of the rug to the other. It is a journey through jungles and over mountains that exist only in the mind. Its wheels must be strong enough for imaginary worlds they read for hours." Anya saw her own daughter, Lily, in the pages. She saw Cole's daughter, Daisy. She saw the profound, almost spiritual responsibility that Klaus Richter and his family felt toward the children of the world. And with every page, she felt the cold, hard shell around her own heart continue to melt away. She realized the truth in the note Cole had left her. "You are trying to buy a heart with a calculator." Caldwell Industries had become all calculator, no heart. "My father," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He used to say that his circuit boards were like little brains, waiting for someone to give them a purpose. I was so focused on making the brains faster and more profitable, I think I forgot all about the purpose." Cole looked at her, his expression full of a warmth and understanding that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. "It's not too late to find it again," he said softly. The air between them grew thick with unspoken emotion. She was no longer a CEO, and he was no longer a janitor. They were just two people, two parents, who understood the weight of a legacy. She found herself looking at his hands as he traced the German script, strong, capable hands that had pushed a mop cart but could just as easily decipher a company's soul. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his on the open page. He stopped reading and looked up at her. His gaze was intense, and in it, she saw a reflection of the same startling, terrifying, and wonderful feeling that was blooming in her own chest. The world seemed to shrink to the space between them. It was a moment of perfect, fragile connection. And then her phone rang, shattering the silence with a shrill, violent buzz. Annoyed, she pulled her hand back, the spell broken. The screen showed it was her head of communications, David Chen. It was the middle of the night in New York. This could only be bad news. "What is it, David?" she answered, her voice sharp again. "Anya, I'm so sorry to wake you, but you need to see this. It just broke. It's a catastrophe." His voice was shaking with panic. "Orion has gone nuclear." A link popped up on her screen. Her blood ran cold. She tapped the link, her heart pounding. The headline was even more vicious than the last one. Exclusive. The janitor and the CEO. Corporate conmans past exposed. Caldwell Industries in freefall. What is this?" she whispered. Cole leaned closer, his face grim, as she read the words aloud, each one a hammer blow. The article, again by Stefan Hess, was a masterpiece of character assassination aimed directly at Cole. Sources have uncovered the shocking past of Cole Bennett, the so-called consultant behind Anya Caldwell's recent bizarre behavior, she read, her voice trembling. Records indicate Bennett has a sealed juvenile file for fraud and was the subject of a grand larceny investigation that was quietly dropped years ago. Our sources allege he took the menial job at Caldwell Industries with the specific intent of getting close to the famously reclusive CEO, preying on her known grief over her father's death to orchestrate a corporate shakedown. The lies were breathtaking in their cruelty. It went on, painting him as a calculating predator and her as his gullible, emotionally unstable victim. It concluded with a quote from an anonymous board member, Orion, stating that emergency measures were being considered to wrest control of the company from a CEO who is clearly under malicious influence. The room was deathly quiet. Cole stared at the screen, his face pale, his expression one of utter shock and violation. They had taken his quiet life, his simple, honorable story, and twisted it into a weapon to destroy them both. The deal was dead. Klaus Richter was a man who valued integrity above all else. He would never partner with a company led by a supposed fool and a con man. Orion hadn't just won. He had burned the entire kingdom to the ground. Anya looked from the poisonous words on the screen to the man sitting beside her, the man who had shown her more integrity and wisdom in 3 days than her entire board had in 3 years, the man whose hand she had just been holding. Her old survival instincts screamed at her. Cut him loose, denounce him, save the deal, save yourself. It was the logical move. It was what the shark would do. Cole finally looked up from the phone, his eyes meeting hers. He didn't look angry. He just looked defeated. "Anya," he said, his voice rough. "I'm so sorry." He expected her to run. To blame him. To call security. He was waiting for the axe to fall. She stared at him, the battle for her own soul raging in her eyes. The fate of her company, her future, and the man she was realizing she was falling for all rested on what she would say next. Anya looked at Cole's defeated face, and the last remnants of the cold, calculating shark inside of her died. In its place, a cold, protective fury rose, sharp and pure. She reached out, not for the phone to call her lawyers, but for his hand. She squeezed it hard. "Don't you dare apologize," she said, her voice a low, dangerous command. "He didn't attack a janitor, Cole. He attacked my partner. This isn't a PR crisis, it's a declaration of war, and Orion just made the mistake of his life." Cole looked up, stunned by the ferocity in her eyes. He saw no fear, no doubt, only a resolute, unwavering loyalty that stole his breath. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice still rough. "The meeting is in 9 hours. We can't disprove lies like these overnight." "No," Anya agreed, her mind already shifting into high gear. "We can't. So we don't play his game." She stood up and began to pace, not with anxiety, but with predatory energy. "He wants to fight in the mud with lies and headlines. Fine, we'll fight in the light with the truth. We walk into that meeting and we own every single word of it." "Own it?" Cole asked, confused. "How?" "We tell him everything," she said, turning to face him. "We show him the article. We tell him exactly who you are. A father who took a quiet job to raise his daughter. We tell him who Orion is, a snake who is trying to sabotage this company for his own gain. No defense, no excuses, just the truth. Klaus Richter values character. Let's show him ours. It was a terrifyingly bold strategy. A gamble on the character of a man they barely knew. Okay, Cole said, a slow, determined nod. Okay. Anya's lips curved into a dangerous smile. And while we're telling the truth, my team is going to be finding it. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number from memory. It was answered on the first ring. Markham, she snapped, wake up your team. I want everything on Orion Blackwood. I want his bank records, his phone logs, any offshore accounts. I want to know who he's been talking to, who he's been paying. I don't care if it's legal. I don't care what it costs. I want the proof that he's behind these articles. You have until my meeting starts. That's 8 hours. Go. She hung up without waiting for a reply. She was no longer just protecting her father's company. She was fighting for the man standing in front of her. The sun rose on the small German town. They didn't sleep. They drank black coffee and talked, not about the deal, but about their lives, their children, their hopes. They were forging an alliance, a bond that felt infinitely stronger than any corporate contract. At 8:55 a.m., they walked out of the inn and into the cool morning air. The walk to the workshop was silent. They were two soldiers walking into the decisive battle, armed with nothing but the truth. When they entered Klaus Richter's office, he was standing behind his desk. The warm, respectful atmosphere of the previous day was gone. The air was frigid. On his desk, beside the leather-bound journal, was a copy of the morning's paper, Cole's face staring up from the front page. Richter's expression was one of profound disappointment. I have read the news this morning, he said, his voice heavy. He looked at Cole. It seems I was mistaken about you. It was a blow. Anya opened her mouth to speak, to launch into their planned defense, but Cole put a hand gently on her arm. He stepped forward. He looked the old toy maker in the eye and began to speak, not in English, but in the fluent, heartfelt German of his late wife. Herr Richter, he began, his voice clear and steady. Everything in that article is a lie, except for one thing. I am a janitor, and I am proud of it. He told him everything. He spoke of Maria, of her love for her Bavarian home. He spoke of her sudden illness, and of the promise he made to her to always put their daughter Daisy first. He explained how the noise of the corporate world had become too much, and how he had chosen a simple, quiet life so he could be the father Daisy deserved. My name is Cole Bennett, he said, his voice thick with an emotion that needed no translation. I am not a con man. I am a father. The only thing of value I have to pass down to my daughter is my character. It is not for sale. Not to him, he pointed at the newspaper, and not to anyone. He finished, his chest heaving, his honest, painful story laid bare in the silent office. Klaus Richter stared at him, his stern facade unmoving. But something deep in his winter blue eyes was shifting. He was a man who understood legacy. He was a man who understood the love of a parent. He had just heard the truth, raw and undeniable. Just as the silence became unbearable, Anya's phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out. It was a secure message from Markham. It contained a single attachment. She opened it. It was a scanned copy of a bank transaction. A wire transfer for 50,000 euros, sent 3 days ago from a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, registered to Orion Blackwood, to a private account belonging to the journalist Stefan Hess. The smoking gun. She took a breath. She looked up from her phone, first at Cole, with a look of fierce pride, and then at Klaus Richter. Herr Richter, she said, her voice ringing with cold, hard certainty. I believe a man's character is defined by his actions. She held up her phone. And I have just received proof of Mr. Blackwood's. Anya turned the phone around, the screen glowing with the damning evidence. Klaus Richter leaned forward, his sharp eyes scanning the details of the transaction. He read the names, the dates, the amount. His expression, already softened by Cole's story, hardened into a mask of pure contempt. Not for them, but for the man who had tried to poison their meeting. He straightened up, the full weight of his 70 years of integrity behind him. He looked from the phone to Anya's determined face, and then to Cole, whose quiet strength had just won the day. "In my life," Richter said, his voice a low, powerful rumble, "I have found there are two types of people, those who build and those who break. This man, Blackwood, is a breaker." He gave a decisive nod. "I prefer to do business with builders." He extended a hand across the desk to Anya. "Ms. Caldwell, you have a deal." Anya took his hand, a wave of triumphant relief washing over her. They had done it. Against all odds, they had done it. She didn't let go of the moment. With Richter as her witness, she pulled out her phone again and made a call. It was 3 a.m. in New York. She didn't care. "Walter, wake up," she said to her chief legal counsel. "Convene an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. I'm invoking Article 7, Section 4 of the corporate bylaws, removal of a board member for actions deliberately harmful to the company. I have irrefutable proof of corporate sabotage and defamation committed by Orion Blackwood. His security credentials are to be revoked immediately. His assets are to be frozen. I want him out of my company by the time my plane touches down." Her voice was steel. It was the voice of the shark. But now it was wielded in the service of justice. That evening, the deal wasn't celebrated in a fancy restaurant. Klaus Richter insisted they come to his home, a warm, rambling house filled with the laughter of his grandchildren. They ate a simple, delicious meal at a long wooden table. For the first time, Anya saw Cole truly relax, charming Richter's wife and making the children giggle as he told them stories. She saw the man he was outside of the crisis, the kind, steady father, and she felt herself falling completely in love. Later, as the stars came out in the clear Bavarian sky, they stood outside in the garden. "You saved me today, Cole," she said quietly. "Not the company. Me. You reminded me of the person I was supposed to be." "You were always that person, Anya," he said, turning to her. "You just built walls so high you couldn't see over them." He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. "I'm glad I got to meet the woman behind the walls." In the soft glow of the porch light, surrounded by the quiet peace of a life well lived, she leaned in, and he met her halfway. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, a culmination of all the trust, respect, and admiration